The story of Congressman Robert Smalls is a historic story that isn't discussed enough. This man isn't taught about in our schools, and he isn't even given the credit that he deserves for his contribution to American society. He was a man born into slavery, who was indirectly educated by his mother, whose father was a white man that abandoned his son as a commodity and used him solely for profit, and a man who was responsible for recruiting 5,000 black soldiers for the Union Army, possibly tipping the scale for the United States of America to defeat our own evil of slavery. And while some historians will claim the Confederate States fought for states' rights, I'll agree that they fought for states' rights to keep slavery alive in what was supposed to be the freest nation of them all. Furthermore, we see a mark of leadership with this man, one that we can trace back to one of the most important figures in the Abrahamic religions, Moses, the Israelite leader who saved the nation of Israel from slavery. This is Ben-Kinney Media's Untold History, American Moses. Congressman Smalls was born on 5 April 1839 in his owner's property in Beaufort, South Carolina. His mother, Lydia Smalls, served in the house but started in the fields many years before. She was taken from her own family on the Sea Islands at the age of 9. It is debated whether John McKee, his son Henry, or the plantation manager Patrick Smalls was the father of Congressman Smalls. Robert Smalls was preferred over all the other slave children. His mother believed that her son was blinded to the horrors of slavery and arranged for him to work on the field by the whipping post as a way to indirectly educate her son about his status as a slave. This is when Congressman Smalls decided to be a badass in a heroic way. He learned a lot for his disobedience, and his mother was becoming concerned about his life. She requested that her son be reassigned as a rented slave laborer. She knew her plan worked way too well. Congressman Smalls could keep $1 from every paycheck he earned, handing the rest of his earnings to his owner. But Congressman Smalls had something other slaves didn't have: his education he received on the water. He knew the Charleston Harbor better than anyone. He landed a job on the CSS Planter. With that job, he met his wife Hannah, a woman owned by the Kingsman family, and she worked at a hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. They received permission from their owners to move into an apartment together, and they had 2 children, Elizabeth and Robert Jr. He knew that at any time his wife could be sold off with his children, and he may lose his family forever. I'd like to buy my family.
Okay, what's a slave like you gonna do with slaves?
I don't see what the big deal is. It's my 2 kids and it's my wife. Why is it a problem for me to buy my family?
And how am I supposed to make money without my slaves working for me?
Listen, this is a business transaction. I understand that at any time, you will be able to sell my wife with my kids to another slave owner. And I'm not willing to let that happen. What can I do to buy my family so I never lose them?
Well, I'll tell you what, give me $800.
$800.
$800 it is, and you have your family.
So if I give you $800, you will sell my family to me.
You heard me right, boy. You heard me right. $800.
I have $100 right now.
Looks like you're $700 too short to buy your family, aren't you?
Okay, let me see what I can do. So he attempted to buy his wife and kids from her owner. They agreed on a steep price of $800. Smalls was $700 short. Ironically, Congressman Smalls looked a lot like Captain Ryla of the CSS Planter, and he planned to use that to his advantage. We're going to compare this with the story of Moses when he asked the Pharaoh to let his people go. Moses knew that the children of Israel were losing the Israelite identity, and he knew that they were giving up hope about becoming anything more than a slave in Egypt. Moses relies on miracles from God, the 10 plagues, to free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt in the Bible. Congressman Smalls inadvertently created 5 plagues of his own, spanning until he became a U.S. Congressman in 1874. On 12 May 1862, Congressman Smalls decides to make his move. The Union Navy has set up a blockade around the Atlantic and Gulf coasts. The first shots of the Civil War were fired exactly 1 year and 1 month before the Confederates are stuck in a defensive in Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston is filled with island forts, including Fort Sumter, under the command of Brigadier General Roswell Ripley. His command is the CSS Planter, the first-class coastwise steamer, used locally for the cotton trade according to the U.S. House Naval Affairs Committee report 20 years later. The 3 Confederate officers on board, Captain C.J. Ryla, pilot Samuel Smith, and engineer Zarek Pitcher, make the foolish decision to leave the ship for a night of partying. The only people left aboard were the ship's 8 slave crew members, including Congressman Smalls. The ship is so heavily armed that Smalls has devised the plan to escape and is willing to use all firepower to make it happen. Helmsman, set a course for the Union blockade on the Atlantic coast. Maximum warp. Hold that command until I give a speech to the crew. Okay, crew, this is going to be one of the toughest things we've ever done. Here's what we've done so far. We've stolen a Confederate starship, and we're about to cross the Charleston Harbor Zone. We cannot be caught going through this area, because if we're caught, we're dead and our families are dead. We have a lot of weapons on this ship, we have a lot of life support, and we have a lot of food. So we need everybody to be on the game, because once we get past here, we'll be able to get back to the Union Federation. All right, red alert, all hands to battle station. Divert all powers to weapons and shields. Engage. You have a commercial property worth less than $1 million, but you can't find a lender to give you a loan term longer than 5 years. You got a high interest rate private lending loan for 5 years with a balloon payment at the end, and you keep having to pay broker fees and lender fees every time that you have to refinance that private loan. I create entertaining videos, and I'm committed to helping you grow your empire with mine. When is the last time your lender said he wanted to grow with you? My name is AP McKinney with Ben-Kinney Media, Arizona Housing Journal, and Rally Home Mortgage. What does your lender do for you? The details of this report I have taken from historian Henry Gates Jr. from The Root in a PBS story, Which Slave Sailed Himself to Freedom? My friend Chaim posted a meme about a man who stole a Confederate ship and saved other slaves and made it to the Union Navy blockade. As someone who has a hard time listening to instructions and orders from others, I instantly felt a connection with this hero, and I had to learn more about him. For me, I've always been a rebel. I've always questioned authority, and I've always made a solution when people said something could not be done. And here is a man, Congressman Robert Smalls, who makes me look like children's play. So what can I do to live up to his reputation? I'll start by making a video comparing him with Moses from the Bible, sharing his own unique plagues that he caused to the Confederacy, and how he too caused the Navy of Pharaoh, Jefferson Davis, to drown in the sea during the Civil War. And to put it in modern terms, he is a black version of James T. Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek, rolled into one heroic individual. In order to create entertainment value, I've decided to make the plot of this story using figures from a well-known sci-fi show, Star Trek. Some might say this is historically inaccurate, and some might even say this isn't the way that he should be remembered. I will argue that Star Trek: The Next Generation was a show with subliminal messages promoting racial and ethnic equality, discussing hot topics of the 90s in a 24th century environment. In memory of Gene Roddenberry and his goal to create a universal Earth where everyone lives in harmony, I would argue that the Earth of Star Trek is the messianic times that Jews, Muslims, and Christians have been yearning for many years. And while a messianic figure was never revealed directly, the lifestyle they enjoyed on Earth is what our respective prophecies tell us what would happen. Thus, Star Trek is extremely relevant to the message I'm trying to deliver, because it is the only show that ever gave us a sneak peek of what society could be like when we put our differences aside and work together as one in society with many shades of opinion and colors.
Aren't you ever concerned of some smart ass calling you pretending to be white?
No. I can always tell when I'm talking to a Negro.
How so?
Take you, for example. You're a pure Aryan white man from the way you pronounce certain words.
Wow. You are so white. Thank you for teaching me this lesson. If you had not brought it to my attention, I wouldn't have noticed the difference between how we talk and how Negroes talk.
Good, good.
I'd love to continue this conversation.
I look forward to meeting you, and we'll be talking real soon.
God bless white America.
Their inventory of weapons included 200 rounds of ammunition, a 32-pound pivot gun, a 24-pound howitzer, and 4 other guns. It was apparent that Congressman Smalls was very trusted by the officers of the crew. Robert Smalls discusses his plan to the other slave crew members on board. According to the Naval Committee report, 2 crew members decided to stay behind. And I quote, "The design was hazardous in the extreme. They were either going to escape or use whatever American firepower available, from guns, gunpowder, and ammunition they have to fight, and if necessary, sink their ship and die trying." And I quote, "Failure in detection would have been certain death." At 2 a.m. in the morning on 13 May, Congressman Smalls dons Captain Rayla's straw hat and orders the planter's skeleton crew to put the boiler on and hoist the South Carolina Confederate flags in disguise. They left the dock in view of General Ripley's headquarters, and they rendezvoused at the West Atlantic Wharf to pick up Smalls' wife, children, along with 4 other women, 3 men, and another child. According to the Navy report, at 3:25 a.m., the planter accelerates, and I quote, "her perilous adventure." From the pilot's house, Smalls blows the ship's whistles while passing the Confederate Fort Johnson. And at 4:15 a.m., Fort Sumter. He passed it as coolly as if General Ripley was on board. Smalls not only knew all the right naval signals to flash, he even folds his arm and hands exactly like Captain Rayla's. Remember earlier when I stated Congressman Smalls looked a lot like Captain Rayla for the CSS Planter? What none of the officers knew is that he has been planning this moment for weeks and is willing to use every weapon on board to see it through. Congressman Smalls did not have the $700 he needed to buy his family's freedom, but the U.S. Congress on 30 May 1862 passed a private bill allowing the Navy to appraise the planter and give Congressman Smalls and his crew a monetary reward of half the value of the CSS Planter for rescuing her from the enemies of the government. Smalls received $1,500 personally, enough to purchase his former owner's home in Beaufort, South Carolina off the tax rolls following the war. Latter Naval Affairs Committee reports stated that his pay should have been substantially higher. The Confederates knew this already, and they put a $4,000 bounty on his head. Still, those on the scene had a hard time explaining how slaves pulled out such a victory, and in the aftermath, aide-de-camp Ravenel even confided to his commander that night before, it would appear that 2 white men and a white woman went aboard and they were not seen to return. Captain Rayla should have been court-martialed. Smalls and his crew had acted alone without the help of anybody. In the North, Smalls was feted as a hero. He lobbied the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, to begin enlisting black soldiers. After President Lincoln acted a few months later, Smalls was able to recruit 5,000 black soldiers by himself. In October 1862, he returned to the now USS Planter as pilot as part of Admiral DuPont's South Atlantic Blockade Squadron.
Helmsman, begin tactical maneuver. Alpha, Delta, Delta, Alpha. Tactical, go ahead and put the tachyon chargers on the photon torpedoes. Lock on the target. Engage.
In 1883, the Naval Affairs Committee reported that Congressman Smalls had engaged in approximately 17 military actions, including the April 7, 1863 assault on Fort Sumter.
Blow those Confederate ships out of the sky. I want to see nothing but fireballs and medals going everywhere. We're going to free every slave in the Confederacy. This is not about winning or losing. This is about what's right and what's wrong.
And the attack on Folly Islands Creek, South Carolina, 2 months later, where he assumed command of the USS Planter when the captain became so demoralized, he hid in the coal bunker.
Admiral DuPont, this is Lieutenant Smalls, U.S. Navy. I'm sending this transmission to you to let you know that I have put the captain of the ship in the brig, and he is no longer in command of the ship. I have assumed command of the ship, and I've got the ship out of harm's way. The captain decided that he was going to hide in the coal bunker when we needed command. So yeah, he's arrested. He's done.
Congressman Smalls was promoted to the rank of captain himself because of his courage. And from December 1863 on, he earned $150 a month, making him one of the highest paid black soldiers at that time. On April 1865, Smalls was on board planter in the ceremony in Charleston Harbor celebrating the end of the Civil War. Congressman Smalls continued to push the boundaries of freedom as the first congressman of the South Carolina State Assembly and Senate, and for 5 non-consecutive terms in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Smalls do solemnly swear to protect the Constitution from all enemies of the United States.
Before he witnessed the rights of Black Americans taken away in South Carolina in the revised 1895 Constitution that took voting rights from blacks. He died in Beaufort on February 22, 1915, in the same house in which he was born as a slave, the one that he bought from his former owner. And he's buried at Tabernacle Baptist Church. With the rise of Jim Crow laws, Smalls stood tough and strong as a fighting advocate for the political rights of Black Americans. And I quote, "My race needs no special defense for the past history of them and this country. It proves them to be equal of any people anywhere. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." For those interested in learning more about this daring Civil War hero, Helen Balwar Moore and W. Martin Dulany, with help from the National Endowment for the Humanities, have curated a traveling exhibit, The Life and Times of Congressman Robert Smalls. You can also find them on YouTube, including a South Carolina State educational video, a 4th grader Black History Month presentation, even a realtor's tour of his former home in Beaufort, South Carolina, which was most recently listed for $1.2 million.
The Robert Smalls home at 511 Prince Street offers a rare chance to own a unique and special piece of history. Built in 1834, the property at Prince and New Streets was previously owned by the first African-American Civil War hero, Robert Smalls. The home was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1974.
This has been AP McKinney with Ben-Kinney Media, giving you the story of a lifetime of Congressman Robert Smalls, a true American hero. Happy Black History Month. I hope everybody enjoyed this presentation, and I hope everybody was able to learn something very valuable. Thank you very much, guys.